Here.
Gordon Eggleton.
Here.
Gary Ellingson.
Here.
Dennis Hoagland.
Here.
Mick McLean.
Here.
Michael Holt.
Here.
Chester Noriakis.
Here.
Henry Quant.
Here.
Wes Ryan.
Here.
Roger Sprague.
Here.
James Taylor. And Susan Walke.
Would you stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance. One nation. With liberty. We need a budget committee chair for urban renewal and also a vice chair. So I will open nominations for a chair person.
Mr. Chairman, I'll nominate Henry Quant as chairman.
Is there a second?
Second.
Are there other further nominations? Are there other further nominations?
I'll move to close the nominations.
Is there a
Second.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded that Henry Quant is the Budget Committee Chair for Urban Renewal. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. We need a vice chair. I open nominations for the vice chair.
I nominate Gordy for vice chair.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Are there any other nominations? Any other nominations?
I move motion that nominations be closed.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that Gordy Eggleton be vice chair of the Urban Renewal Budget Committee. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
I got it. I've already got it. I got it. Yeah. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Kurt's going to come forward and give us a little opening statement here, I'm pretty sure. I want to make a comment. If you wish to speak on an agenda or non-agenda item, please sign up on the sheet near the entrance door to the council chambers. You will be called to speak during the public comment section. Comments and testimony on agenda items listed under public hearing and public comments will be taken at this time. Take it, Kurt.
Thank you, and good evening. For the benefit of our viewing audience, I'm Kurt Olson, the director, and this is Allison Robertson, the assistant director of Lincoln City Urban Renewal Agency. And we're here this evening to present to you the proposed urban renewal budget for the next fiscal year, 2013 and 2014. As stated in the Urban Renewal Budget message, the city formed the Urban Renewal District in 1988 with the purpose of addressing blight, to attract private investment, and to improve the visual quality of our community. Blight comes in many forms, and it was referred to in the Lincoln City Plan as deteriorating and dilapidated buildings, inadequate planning and zoning, irregular shaped and sized lots due to subdivisions and property selling and dividing in the past, prevalence of depreciated property values, underutilization of properties, and the existence of inadequate streets and utilities. One must remember that when this plan was developed, the Lincoln City was still dealing with the issues of 6 cities and communities trying to come together to form one city, and they all had varying degrees of planning that had that had been associated with them, some none at all, and the infrastructure was completely different throughout the whole area. So the city was trying to deal with how to fund many of those improvements and to do the upgrades so that it would be able to function as one city. The year 2000 development plan, which is the plan that was created to administer the Urban Renewal Agency, lists projects in 4 general categories: public works infrastructure, parks and recreation, public parking, and economic development, which at the time was in the form of a business rehabilitation loan program. The Urban Renewal Agency operates out of 3 funds: the Tax Increment Fund, which collects the tax revenue and pays the debt service; the program rehabilitation program that the property rehabilitation program that I just had mentioned. This is the fund that it's funded out of the agency's general fund and also from reloan payments. And then the Urban Renewal General Fund, this being the working fund of the agency, Revenue comes from bond proceeds, from interest, from grants, and from lease payments. The general fund budget shows reductions in both the personal services and material and services this year over the current budget year. The capital outlay identifies several previously approved projects of the agency, and I'll run through what those are here. The North 33rd Street crosswalk, this is a partnership with Public Works, where a pedestrian-actuated flashing light system will be installed at the work to augment the work that's already been done there on North 33rd Street, that new crosswalk. It's possible that a portion of this project, or maybe even all of it, might actually be funded before the end of this fiscal year, but we're not sure, and so we went ahead and put it in there just to cover the bases in case they weren't able to get the project completed by the end of June. Funding for this project is found in the budget under crosswalk construction. In the D-Lake area, we have the major undergrounding project that's under design. The design of this undergrounding of the overhead utilities in the D River area continues, and construction is estimated to take place in 2014, 2015. So the construction costs won't show up in this year's budget, only the design work. Funding for this project will be in the listed as the D River Lake Access budget line, which is now the line that we use for associated D Lake projects. It had been labeled that way in the past, and last year it got relabeled to D Lake projects, and somehow this year it reverted back to D River Lake Access. So it has to do with the fund that was a line item in years past, and so the funding that you see on the left-hand side of your budget message tends to relate to that project. So just wanted to bring that out so that you knew where this funding was located and why it might be labeled a little odd. D-Lake Sidewalk. The agency is also funding the construction of a section of sidewalk along Highway 101 in the area of Southeast 19th Street. This is between the former Hilltop Restaurant and the North Lincoln Sanitary Service. Funding for this is found under sidewalk construction. In the Nelscott area, we have the 35th Street parking lot. This should be designed and constructed within this budget year. This partnering project adds additional parking in the area where some parking spaces will be lost as a result of the ODOT highway project. Funding is found in the Nelscott renovation projects as a budget line item. In the far south end of town, in the Cutler area, the Cutler-Keel sanitary sewer line extension, this design was just recently completed in the current budget year, and we plan to construct the project in this budget year, this budget year we're looking at here. It extends the utilities to areas along Highway 101 in the Cutler District that are not served at this time. We're also working with an existing business in town that's planning to expand their operation to this area. This wouldn't have been possible without the sewer extension. The public and subsequent private project should be a big boost to this area of Lincoln City. Funding will be found for this project in the Cutler City Renovation Projects budget line item. You'll notice a new budget line that's been placed in all of the budgets that you'll probably be seeing, or most of them, not only just urban renewal, but also in some of the city budgets. And it's at the bottom of page 2, and it's ADA planning, something along that, and you'll see that it shows that there's $0 proposed for it. That doesn't mean that we don't plan to show progress in this area, only that this type of expenditure for the agency is normally just built into project costs. We don't intend to do a lot of renovation stuff, or we just go in and do ADA work, and so we've got that zeroed out. But you will see at the bottom of page 3, for example, there's a line item in capital construction called ADA improvements, and there's $20,000 in there. And I think there's about another $20,000 or $30,000 in a line item called miscellaneous contracted services, where we intend to participate with the consulting services to assist the city in the ADA consulting work that's getting ready to take place. Also listed in the budget message are a number of projects that the agency will be considering over the next couple of years for funding. And funding for these projects was primarily found in other construction for the things that we think might be able to be accomplished in this budget year, and also in the additional capital reserves for projects that will be going on after this budget. That's the general fund overview. In the property rehabilitation fund, you'll see that, again, that we have the three programs. This in your document starts on page 9. We'll continue our efforts in economic development. We'll soon have 6 programs available to property and business owners. That would be our existing rehabilitation facade improvement loan program, an energy efficiency loan program, a signage replacement program, business expansion loan program, and a local program support grants. This fund continues to have a strong balance, and we receive over $100,000 each year just in loan repayments from the loans that we've put out in the past. This is an overview of the highlights of the proposed budget. We'd be glad to answer any questions that you have regarding either of those funds. And as far as the tax increment fund that's in there too, we probably are going to be able to answer some of those questions, but if we can't, we'll find resources around here that can. That's the fund, again, that pays debt service, collects bond proceeds and pays debt service. So I don't know if you'd like to take questions now. We'd be glad to do it. We'll do it on the agenda item where it talks about review.
Question, Kurt.
Yes.
That was the budget review, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to skip back up here and take comments from citizens present first, and then we'll call you back up, and then we'll
Okay,
go
let's do that. All right. Thank you.
with comments from the Budget Committee. Do I have anyone signed up from the public to make any comments? Jerry?
I just have a couple of quick comments I'd like to ask about the budget there. Name is Jerry Warner. I live at 1233 Lakewood Council, and our new attorney. And anyway, what I wanted to ask about on urban renewal is when I look at this, I know it's a small item, but because of the fact that 2014 urban renewal is going to be gone, and anyway, I see in there's $2,900 for training, and even though it's less than $3,000, you kind of wonder about urban renewal is going to be phased out. What kind of training would we need for $2,900? That's my question to you folks. Another question that I have here is under on bonds. It shows that this year you're going to be selling $2,150,000 in bonds, and I wanted to know kind of what they were earmarked for. Previous year, you showed that you had budgeted $2,500,000, and then it shows an estimate in 2012-13 of $3 million. So I wonder what in the world those are earmarked for, and maybe I could get a question answered on that. I think Kurt really summed it up when he said that originally when he talked about what urban renewal was all about. And I think the amazing thing is that we're somewhere in the neighborhood of $43 million that we've spent now on urban renewal, and there hasn't been one blighted building in the entire city demolished, revamped, redeveloped out of that $43 million. I think it's something for you guys to think about a little bit. I totally disagree, of course, with the undergrounding on the D River there. And there's another question I have in here that I'd like to ask about. It has D River access. It shows a proposed budget of $350,000. I'd like to know what that's all about. Thank you for your time. I hope I get some answers.
Thank you, Jerry. Do I have any more comments from citizens present? If not, I'll open up to comments from the Budget Committee members. Kurt, I guess you're going to be back on again. Do I have any comments from the Budget Committee?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Just a reminder for all the members that the mics are directional, and you need to have them right in front of you so that the public can hear what we're saying.
Well, there's a couple of things going there. The $43 million that was mentioned has more to do with our total indebtedness, the amount of money that we can spend over the 25-year life of urban renewal. We're not going to get to $43 million because of a bunch of issues, including some of the area that was intended to be in the urban renewal district was removed from the district, so we didn't get the revenue from that. But we're getting close. We get close to those numbers. So that's the one. That was the one issue. The other issue that you mentioned about is in regards to the rehabilitation loan program. Those are loans that we provide to to property owners and businesses in the urban renewal district to do facade improvements to their building. We've done about $1.6 million in loans, and we have the $400,000 is money we have available to make more loans. Mm-hmm.
We seem to be having some technical difficulties here as far as people being heard. I think we may have to share our directional mics with, I think the freestanding ones aren't working.
Oh, okay.
Kathy, am I right? The freestanding ones aren't working and these are working? Check yours. Mic check.
Is it on?
Mic check.
Okay, I guess we'll just have to share microphones here and anything else. So, any more comments from Budget Committee members?
Mr. Chairman, I'm just trying to figure out a good way to go down through this, and I think along that way can ask some questions, and I'm trying to see. I guess for me, I understood the report and the message projecting some of the activities that the agency has previously approved and are underway, and the spillover of those into this next fiscal year budget. And that was helpful. As I guess, wondered if we could spend a little time maybe on the going forward and some of the discussion about either new projects. To me, that started, wasn't this where we started talking Ocean Lake, or am I, page 2 of the written, and then Nell Scott talking about, well, I guess all these are, the 35th Street parking lot is there for Nell Scott, and alignment of 32nd, even though you didn't get into that. I was just reading the narrative, because those are definitely reflective in the number pages, correct?
Yes, but probably not total cost, but design. Many of them are mentioned as just being design work.
Okay.
So the total cost won't be in there, but some, and then some of them are. So they're. I think we allocated those in the line called other construction, so that if there are some things, then there's $236,000 there for the projects that haven't been approved yet, but we wanted to put forth as being for you to consider for this budget here.
Well, I wonder if it would be helpful, Mr. Chairman, if we just went to the number of pages, page with the actual, general fund, and to me, those are kind of the boilerplate fed-in numbers. I'm betting, like one of the questions, training. I'm making the broad assumption that you're fed that number as part of overall personnel training as city employees.
There's both in there, yeah.
Okay.
There's citywide training that takes place that we participate in, and then there's specialized training that we do.
But kind of, fuel costs, all the stuff is just an allocation kind of stuff.
Many of those, like that, are exactly like you say.
Yeah.
Those numbers come from someone else that's making those allocations.
So would it be all right to just kind of move down that, go through page 1, and that looks like salary costs and benefit costs, and it shows like you've reduced your time allocation, correct, Kurt, and down, and then costs associated with the office, and just kind of see, are there any questions on either one of these pages, and just kind of Mr. Chairman, take the pages kind of that way, and just move down and give the committee maybe time, members to ask a question as something jumps out, and that way we can then, again, here's capital outlays on page 3 that, Kurt's spoken to, but you actually see where it is, and could maybe ask, when he could ask the questions.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I do have a point of clarification. When does urban renewal actually sunset?
The word sunset means that we no longer collect any tax increment.
Right.
That takes place in June of 2014.
Okay. So, but there's still
We will probably
activities.
still have $2 million
Right.
available for completing projects.
Through fiscal year 2014-15.
Probably.
Yes. Okay. That's what I remembered originally, but I was just
Yeah.
curious because I'm hearing other things, so, yeah. All right, thank you. That was just, I wanted that clarified.
So do we have any questions on Chester?
I do have a question. I do have a question on page 1, Mr. Olson, regarding the bond sales. Could you speak to that, please?
This year we will do our final bond sale. Much of that money will go towards paying off our the bonds that we currently have out. I think there's 2 of them: the 2004 bond and the 2007 bond, and then the rest of that then will be available for closeout projects in the end. And it'll be the last bond sale.
Thank you.
Clarification, if I could. When you say this year, are you meaning this year or fiscal this year?
I mean this year. I try to say current year when I'm talking about the current year, and this year, when I say this year, I'm usually referring to this budget.
To this budget. This year is this
Yeah.
fiscal year budget that we're looking at. So what this is saying is there's a plan to issue new bonds
Correct.
in this coming fiscal year.
Correct.
And with that,
We'll pay off all of our bonded indebtedness and then have the proceeds necessary for closeout projects. And that will be the last of our revenue that comes in, other than things like grants. If we do leases, if we do lease any of our property in the future, have a little bit of interest on the money that we have in the bank.
so again, to help Mr. Warner, what I heard in his question was the previous bond of the fiscal year we're in right now was issued, were the projects that we've been doing and you named earlier. It generated funding for those.
Yes. Yes.
And then the bonds that we're going to sell in this next fiscal year will continue those projects that are not ready for funding yet, as well as the ones we're going to be talking about that are in this budget. Is that, I mean, I know it's, I'm just trying to attach
Yep, that's generally
where
correct.
where the money.
Like I said, it will address in the tax increment fund, it'll address our Series 2004 and 2007 bonds that are currently outstanding. Yeah, I'll pay those off.
If I may, then, and I'm coming from a business perspective, is that like the new issued bonds will basically refinance the bonds you're paying off, and bonds will have some maturity, I don't know, are they 10-year bonds, 5-year bonds?
The current one, the one that we're going to do this year is a new, well, is called de jure financing. Okay. And basically, we can't use tax increment money for anything other than paying off our debt by law, by state law.
Okay.
So then you go out and you borrow money to buy the car, and then you have the car.
Right.
And so you can only do that. And so de jure financing allows you to borrow money one day and pay it back the next. And then you'll go out and basically sell a bond for one day, pay it off the next, and then your money comes out of the debt service fund and it goes into the general fund for working capital. So it won't be a long-term bond issue. It'll be a one-day bond issue.
But you'll still have that liability to pay that bond off, correct?
Well, we will the next day. We will have proceeds from our last tax increment that we get in order to be able to pay that off.
Okay.
It has more to do with state law and rules about which money can be spent for which, and you have to get it out of this piggy bank and into this piggy bank in order to spend it on a bench. Okay. You can't buy benches out of this. You can only pay back your debt. Okay, you got to put it over.
That makes sense. So. Thank you.
Any more questions on page 1? Now we'll move on to page 2.
So page 2 is basically, you can see most of those line items are pretty general. They're $2,000, $2,500, those sorts of things. They're guesstimates of what expenditures we might expect. Again, they're not very large numbers, so we don't spend too much time trying to identify exactly how much money will be spent in that particular line item, but just generally based on past performance. The big one that you'll see there is down about 4 lines down, $60,000, where last year, over the last few years, we've had nothing in that line item. And that, again, has to do with those projects that have not been approved yet, that we're hoping to be able to bring forward. And so we put that money in there for design and engineering for those projects. And so that's why you see that number being so big. In the past, we've always identified specific projects and put the money in the specific project. But this year, we're doing it a little differently.
Any questions on page 2?
I have one question. When urban renewal sunsets, and it's already been mentioned that there are ongoing projects, even though we're no longer collecting the tax increment, what kind of a percentage decrease do you see in the overall budget at that time compared to what we're looking at now?
If the agency continues for only one more year, probably not much, because we're going to have we spend about $2 million a year. We'll have $2 million to close out with. If we go longer than that, then it would start significantly dropping. It would change the exponential curve that, we're at our very highest amount of money that we're collecting now. Then from there, we're going to drop to here. So we will still have that much money, and it'll go as fast as we can do projects is how fast it will dry up.
Chester.
On page 2, we have a number of systems maintenance charges from Cutler down to Nelscott.
Yes.
What does that entail?
Those are expenditures that relate to those specific areas that the Finance Department doesn't want to capitalize. So if we have, for example, we have a project in that area, we're going to have a meeting or something, and we need supplies for that, or if we need to buy a bench for the Ocean Lake District, that sort of thing, then we can do it from here as materials and services rather than putting it in the capital budget. Then all that has to be depreciated, has to be followed and depreciated down through the years. So things that aren't going to be very expensive, we throw in there as a little fund to be able to fund those things.
Thank you.
Any more questions on page 2? Moving on to page 3.
Top of page 3, you see economic development. We've been asked by our bond counsel advised us that to do our best to not show expenditures that we can't justify. And last year, we had economic development. Well, we had $300,000 in there, and when they looked at that when we were reissuing bonds and trying to explain, well, what are you going to use that money for? We didn't have a list of projects. We just had allocated some funding for that for what comes up. They asked us not to do that, and so you see what we've identified as being able to justify, and mostly that comes from those program support grants that we've talked about in the past that will come out of there. But we do have plenty of money for economic development, but that won't be shown in the general fund, and that's in the loan fund, program loan fund. So that's a big difference that you see there. The other 3 items are reimbursements that we provide to the general fund and for their services from other city employees and such, and equipment over the building, and then the reimbursement to the Lincoln Square Fund, which is our portion of the office space that we use and such, and then the transfer for percent for the arts. I always get this wrong. I'm not sure if it's 1% or a half of 1%, something like that. Of all the construction that we do, we give, there's an ordinance that requires then, it allows us to provide funding to the for the art committee to use on art projects in the city. And then below that are the capital outlay projects. And I can go through those sort of individually if you like.
Go ahead and do that, Kurt, please.
Okay. So again, the first 2 are small items, but that fall under those categories of office equipment that would have to be capitalized. We don't anticipate. I don't think there's an anticipation of an expenditure there. Sometimes like copy machines and printers and those sorts of things. The line item that says property development, that refers to our 15th Street property for marketing the development of the 15th Street property in the Ocean Lake area. You see that's down from $10,000 last year where we did the study. This year we're going to be doing some marketing and some advertising to see if we can get that going this year. And so that's what that is. These 2 items are zeroed out. The sidewalk construction refers to the sidewalk I mentioned in the southeast 19th Street area between Hilltop and North Lincoln Sanitary. That's the funding for there. And then the $236,000, again, that's that other construction. It's just a list of the projects that you see in the budget message for any of those that the agency would like to move forward this year. Then we have funding available to do that. The $180,000, that's, again, it falls in the, well, that's for the Bay Walk project in the area of the Bay House. That's a project that we've designed several years ago. It was on the list to move forward, but we said that we were going to try to get some grant funding to do that. We thought we were going to be able to, but we've applied for 3 different ODOT grants to fund that project, and there's such a need out there. They sort of look at the funding that we have available to us and suggest that perhaps their funding would maybe meet another need where this is a project that probably will come in at $150,000 to $200,000, and And so we haven't been able to get a grant for that. So we're going to bring it forward for the agency to do that project if you so desire. Then we have the Nelscott renovation projects, and that refers to the parking lot at 35th Street. As I said, we're going to lose some parking because of the project, the highway project, and so we want to be proactive and try to get this new parking lot built before the ODOT project. And so that's for the design of that parking lot and the construction. Then the Dee River Lake access, that's the money for not only the undergrounding in the area of the Dee Lake. Again, it's only for the design of that, which was about $120,000. But it's also for the design of the new traffic signal at South First Street and for the construction of the new traffic signal. Then we go to the Cutler City renovation projects, and that is for the Cutler Keel sewer line extension and the crosswalk construction is for the project that I mentioned up by Sambo's and in that area of the lights, the blinking lights for the pedestrian crossing. The ADA improvements, again, those are the ones that will be identified in the consultants' reports, and it changes slightly, and I don't think the city's completely identified on the exact scope, but it was my understanding that originally the consultant was going to look at areas within the urban renewal district because we had funding to do projects, and so we budgeted money for those projects that are identified by the consultant that the agency then could step forward and do that are within the district. And then we have land purchased, or land purchase. We have allocation in there. Again, it's a number that sort of keeps passing along. We've identified a few properties that the agency and the city may be interested in purchasing, and so we have funding available for that. And then the last line item in that category is basically our beginning balance for the following year, plus whatever we don't spend in this budget year. But it's basically the carryover. It's unallocated at this time.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Kurt, I think you skipped over that third item on there, the building improvements, third item down in that category. Any specific building improvements that you have in mind?
Well, in the first column, the top of the column says estimate. That's the estimated year end, the amount that we figured that we would spend. The next column is the budget number, and it's zero.
Oh, so you're not budgeting anything for that? Okay, very good. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Any more questions?
The turnoff there, the Bay Park,
The gravel area,
right before the Bay House.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. And it's and for the viewing audience and those that might not have as much familiarity with it, it's to build that section of what we call the Bay Walk. And the Bay Walk basically goes all the way around the bay. It's just we haven't built all of the sections yet. So this is one more of those sections. The last section then would be to go from there to the bridge, and then that would allow a nice sidewalk all the way from the interior of Cutler City, all the way into Taft and up to 51st Street.
Are we still working on grant funding with that, too?
Yeah, I think that we've exhausted our efforts in trying to find grant funding for that project. So we're going to bring it back to the agency and try to see if we can fund it from the agency, if you approve that.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Mr. Chairman, Kurt, I guess the question I would have is, and it's just gymnastics, but the Capital Reserve Fund, you're showing $2.3 million, roughly. Theoretically, that could be used, so that's the question, that could be used if other projects came along and when we had time to do them in this next fiscal year?
Correct.
So I guess the question, up above, we've had the item other construction. Now the $236,000. you'd named some suggested things in the narrative, but that could be just as well rolled into the additional capital reserve that somewhere along the line during the fiscal year, we could allocate it to another project, or, okay. I'm trying to make sure that we're not restricted in any way, by putting a line item somewhere, and what I hear you saying is not.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Whatever doesn't get spent out of the capital or materials and services, then would end up in that additional capital reserve the following year.
Go. Yeah. And then the other item, just again for clarity, the D River Lake access line item, $350,000, again, is the light. It's, redoing the light.
It's the design of that and the construction.
And construction.
And the design of the undergrounding.
So the combination of all that, the undergrounding, design of the undergrounding, but the design and construction of the light. Because we'll see this again next fiscal year when we actually have the construction of the underground.
Right. Yeah. Good. And that construction is going to run well over $1 million.
Yeah.
So much of that money that you see there is like
just
a couple $1 million to spend. No, maybe only half of that is not really been allocated. I mean, earmarked, I would say. I mean, it isn't like you have to do the undergrounding. If we do the design, you don't have to do the undergrounding. Right. But we're making sure it's there if you do, which we assume you are. So we want to make sure that there is money there to do it.
Okay.
Is that undergrounding for public walking to get across 101, or?
No, it's to underground the overhead utility lines.
Oh.
The power, the phone, cable, and about 3 or 4 other. ODOT has a line up there, and the Comcast has a line, and those sorts of things.
I was thinking it was to relieve some of the congestion, with the traffic stopped at that light.
No, it's undergrounding the overhead utilities. Sorry. Thank you for clarifying that, and remove the poles.
On the west side of the highway.
On the west side of the highway.
Thank you. Any more questions? Gary?
Mr. Chair, I don't know if this would follow the format you're working with, but would the audience be able to ask a question?
I'm not totally sure. We had public comment earlier. I think Jerry can... Let's continue on, and then we'll get to that at the end. Any more questions on page 3? Any questions on page 4?
Basically, there's nothing on page 4. It shows it's zeroed out because those contingency funds have been placed in the additional capital reserve line.
Page 5.
Need to be collected.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Page 5, Mr. Olson. Estimated composite tax rate, $14 per thousand?
Yes.
Thank you.
Hey, Kurt, the increase in value, that 2.5%, who determines that?
The county assessor office. Of all the property within the district, property within the district, urban renewal district, which runs basically all of Highway 101. It gets bigger in certain areas. My joke is it looks like a boa constrictor that swallowed 6 chickens. It's big in Color City, small to Taft, big in Taft, small to, that kind of thing.
Chester?
Mr. Olson, on that same line, estimated increase in value, historically, have we seen an increase in value every year?
I believe we have. I'd have to go back and check. That increase used to be much more. Sometimes it approached 10%. But ever since Measure 50, where it capped it at 3%, our increases have been similar to that.
Just going to elaborate a little. This is actually showing how we came up with the property tax revenue. So this is assessed increase in its taxable assessed, not market. And that's limited at 3%, but the last couple years, we've actually seen less than 3%. So.
Thank you.
Any more questions on page 5? Page 6?
I have one question, excuse me. On page 5, there's an amount of tax that's not collected in the year that it's supposed to be paid by taxpayers. What happens if 7, 8, 10 years later, all of a sudden that tax is collected? Does that go back to our, or go to our urban renewal agency, or does that just go to the general fund and who gets it?
I gave him my address, so no, it's my understanding that we won't collect any more funding, any more tax revenue after that, after the June of 2014. Whatever funding comes in that's been delinquent taxes, then it's just divvied up amongst all the taxing districts. Now, that's my understanding. If that's different, I'll let you know. But if you look back to the first page of the general fund, under resources, there is, no, it's not in the general fund. It's in, we haven't got to it yet. It's in the next page, on page 7. It says current property taxes, and then prior property taxes.
Right.
So in the past, when somebody paid a delinquent tax, then it comes in under that. So we have been getting some in the past, but we won't after June 14th.
So that just goes to the city general fund then?
The city, the county, the school district, vector control, museum, library, those sorts of things. Fire department.
Any questions on page 6?
Page 6.
If not, moving on to page 7.
Okay, and page 7 starts the second fund that we have, the tax increment fund. And basically, this is, like I said, we acquire debt and we pay off the debt out of this. So the resources are coming in property taxes, and then we obviously get interest on those property taxes. And then we use the resources for our expenditures are then simply servicing the debt that we have had in the past. And there are, you can see when you get down in the middle of the page where it says debt service, and there was the interest on the Series 2003. Those were paid off. The 2004 and the 2007 interest and principal are both listed there for that we still need to pay off.
Any questions on page 7? Any questions on page 8? Moving on to page 9.
And then page 9 again starts a new, our third and final fund, the property rehabilitation program. We get some interest on the money that we have deposited. We're anticipating $110,000 in loan repayments. We had $140,000 last year, but several of the loans have been retired. So these loans have been 10-year loans that we started maybe 13 years ago, 14 years ago, and so some of them are starting to retire now. And so that, as you can see, that number for loan repayments is anticipated to be about $110,000. And then as you go down there, the beginning balance is the money that we have in this account available for as resources. And then we use the money for a little bit for architectural services. When somebody comes and has wants to get a loan, that one way that we have found to be able to encourage the right type of facade improvement or something that we think would be helpful, then the loan program provides free architectural services up to $1,200, and so that comes out of there. Property rehabilitation, and so then the remaining funds we've allocated into two categories, basically to continue to provide loans for people that want to in this budget year and this budget year, and also in economic development programs that we haven't yet identified.
Well, but haven't we found those, aren't those the funding of the programs the agency's been approving along the way under the
Right.
toolkit?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So that,
But we just haven't allocated, we don't have any specific projects.
gotcha.
in those
Okay, but
programs.
that shows that there's 300,000 going to that economic toolkit
Exactly.
and the programs under that.
And that finishes off that program.
Any questions on page 9? Page 10? Have any more comments? From the Budget Committee?
I guess, again, just reiterating, so it's a question that, once this budget is approved, that allows the agency to then start having discussion about future projects. And in essence, we're not tied, other than the projects we've already approved, the agency has, and we've got identified here in design or funding, but new ones are yet to be determined, but there's plenty of funding available, or will work within that framework of the 2.3 million and, what the other one identified as other construction. Yeah, correct. And that's agency discussion and, okay.
Yep.
Mr. Chair, I thought we only had somewhere around $1 million for future projects, since the undergrounding is $1 million of that $2 million, and that's already been projected as a project, and we're designing that project. So, but really, we're looking at $1 million rather than $2 million.
It's around $1 million that hasn't been
Right.
allocated, or hasn't, allocated, I guess is a good term.
What I guess I'm confused, because that's what I was asking. 2.3 shows additional capital reserve on page 3.
And the undergrounding is going to be somewhere between $1 million
Gotcha.
and 1.5.
There you go,
That will be
okay.
used out of that.
So again, we have...
You said we had plenty of money. I wanted to jump in, but I didn't.
No, I'm just...
It's a lot of money.
Yes.
But we probably can't do everything that we want to do. I wanted to give you a list of the things that we're thinking about and proposing.
Okay.
And it's likely that we could probably complete that list, but I have every expectation that other projects we haven't even thought about will come up in the
Right.
next year that will look, and people will look at urban renewal.
Well, that's helpful, thank you, because, again, going back to my own earlier question of, what do we call it, the Dee River Lake access and undergrounding, the construction actually has to be done yet, and that's in that 2.3. That's the kind of nice reminder, I think, I'll speak for myself, I need, that there are some projects that we're only in design stage in this fiscal budget, and so we need to make sure we have some money in the future to finish the project. So thanks. That's helpful, because, I was starting to think about...
You wanted to spend more money.
Well, no, I was looking at other projects, because I looked at some of our earlier worksheets, and was trying to put it all together. So that's helpful. Thank you.
Any more questions? Chester?
Mr. Chair, do we need to approve the tax increment calculation as a body?
I guess the answer is no from the finance director, so shake it ahead.
But you may approve the budget.
Before we do that, one more. I'd like to make sure Mr. Warner gets his question answered.
That was my, if there's no more questions from the Budget Committee, I'm going to go ahead and ask Mr. Warner to go ahead and finish asking his question. He wants to come forward?
Maybe I just don't understand your, again, my name is Jerry Warner. When I show, I'm referring back to page 1 in the budget, and it shows total resources of $4,945,835, and included in that figure is the $2,150,000 for bond money. And then when you refer back to total expenditures on page 3, it shows that amount, and I'm having a hard time understanding how that Kurt referred to that $2,150,000 was paying down bonds, because it shows it as part of the resources and it balances out with the total expenditures. Plus, it shows a reserve of $2,312,874. Maybe I'm just not seeing this properly. Maybe one of you can explain it to me. You understand what I'm saying?
I'm not even understanding what you're saying,
Okay.
so,
When I
you
look
can...
on page 1,
I see the 4945, got it.
okay,
Now what?
in proposed budget of $2,150,000.
Now, hold, where are you looking?
Looking at bond sales.
Up under other resources, bond sales, 2.150 million.
Okay.
Okay, that's part of the
You
49.
add it with the beginning balance, and you have $4,945,000. Okay, and then I'm referring over here to page 3, and it shows under total expenditures that same amount, $4,945,000, but it doesn't show that money is paying the bonds down, I guess is what I'm asking. My question is, where does it show bond payment? It doesn't, that I can see.
Sit tight.
Part of the reserves and part of the expenditures. I mean, it balances out, but it doesn't show bond payment. Maybe I'm not following you here.
So bond payments are made out of the tax increment fund, because that's where the property taxes go, is into that fund. And so the property taxes are used to pay the bond payment. So it's on page 7, $2.2 million.
On page 7,
So under principal, you'll see our existing bonds, 2004 and 2007, and above that, you'll see principal, which is not labeled. It would be for this new issuance of $2.2 million. That's the payment for the de jure bond that we would do next fiscal year.
And it's reducing which bonds?
It's reducing this it's paying this bond here, the 2.15.
in the same fiscal year. Yeah, the one that's being issued and then paid.
Okay. I'm satisfied.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for taking the time.
Any more comments from Budget Committee members? If not, I'll take a motion to pass the budget for the urban renewal for 2013 and 14.
So moved.
Second?
And this is a roll call vote, right?
Anderson,
Yes.
Eggleton, Ellingson,
Yes.
Hoagland,
Yes.
McLean, Holt, Norikis,
Yes.
Quant,
Yes.
Ryan,
Yes.
Sprague,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
and Walke.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Spare, that's pretty good.